Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's biggest B2B sales show, where we don't just help you hit your sales target, we help you thrive in sales. In this video, 5 of the world's leading presentation and pitching experts share their tips of how to put together the perfect sales pitch.
A lot of companies are tightening their budgets for travel, and it's very expensive to get salespeople in front of a customer. That's a big investment, and sometimes the sale isn't at a point where it warrants that type of investment. And a lot of times that virtual presentation is that first introduction to the customer, and it's much more cost effective for sure. So it's very important. It's very important to do it well if that is your first engagement, especially. I always think if you can get live, that is the preferred method of contact. There's studies done on how people receive information from others. A percentage comes from the sound of your voice, from your body, and then from the words you say. And a huge amount, like 67%, comes from that physicality. And if you remove that physicality, or even put distance between you and the listener, that's a big barrier to overcome. And you can't read what the other prospect, what the prospect is, their reaction. So tools and technology are great, but a lot of times it's an illusion that you have control because you don't know what people are doing on the other side. I always tell salespeople, whatever you're doing on a demo or presentation virtually, that's what your audience is doing. If you're heating up coffee and you're checking your email and posting on LinkedIn, that's what your audience is doing the minute they're not engaged. I think we're just very hyper aware of how we look, and we put too much on that. I mean, the impact that it makes, the fact that you're doing these podcasts now, in video says a lot. I think you've seen some results from that in terms of audience growth. It is like I said, the human face is what we're drawn to as other humans. You take that away and you really depersonalize the whole experience. Think about how easy it is if a salesperson calls you to just kind of dismiss them, maybe be rude. But if you're face-to-face, it's much more difficult. And for me, I always feel if I see someone else on a webcam doing, a web presentation or web demo for me, I feel this sense of obligation to pay attention. I know they can't see me, but it's subconscious, and I feel like there's a real person there. The biggest thing we have to overcome in a web presentation or a demo is that lack of physicality, that lack of presence. And the best way, the easiest way to make up for that is using your webcam.
What we do is, if you think about the span of human attention, call it 20 minutes, right? Now, I know that all these smart asses are going to say, well, this podcast is going for an hour or 45 minutes, right? But we're trying to help and educate and give you stuff, right? And our course material that we teach can go 40 minutes, but we're trying to help. But when you go in and you want something from somebody, okay, the span of human attention is about 20 minutes. I know I can't run longer than 20 minutes, but the best people in the world know they can't run longer than 20 minutes. You might not have 20 minutes, right? You might, so you can only pitch as long as you could be compelling, and you can't go longer than 20 minutes without some kind of reset, without some kind of hard reset. Okay, so knowing that I have 20 minutes in which I'm able to be compelling, the second I start walking in that room, the countdown timer starts. So if I spend 5, 6, 7 minutes discussing sports or the weather or Jewish geography but Christmas vacation or whatever it is, that's burning time. So I understand it's important to create some social relevance, especially if we know people in common. But nobody is going to do a deal with you because, so you like, you have a sports car, I have a sports car, right? Similar, we like the same kind of automotive pursuits and everything. But if there's a $5 million deal on the table, if there's a $150,000 deal, if there's a $50,000 in the deal on the table, and you don't like it structurally, and your team goes, yeah, I don't know, there's some problems with it. You don't go, hey, yeah, but we both like sports cars, let's do it anyway, right? So that stuff doesn't really buy you all this preliminary jockeying on who we know, what sports we like, things we do in common, all that preliminary doesn't really buy you that much. Okay, it buys you a little bit of social validation. It buys you a little bit of safe space to operate. It buys you some relevance. It is a time where you sort of correct any status imbalance, but that's got to be short because clock is ticking down.
I think the problem with most presentations, sales pitches, in fact, any form of communication that is formal, as opposed to a conversation that you know with your friends around a dinner table, but any conversation that becomes formal, which is like a job interview or a pitch or a presentation or public speaking, anything like that, the trouble is people stop being themselves. That's my biggest bugbear. So I always say, when I'm working one-to-one with people, or if I'm running a course in the company, I'd always say, can we try and drop this public mask? And one of my clients is Christie's, you know, the auctioneers, and I coach their auctioneers all over the world. And I was in New York a few weeks ago, and I had their top, and they won't mind me saying this, but they had their top 10 auctioneers, American auctioneers, sitting in the room. And I said to them, I'm going to ask you to do something incredibly simple now. I want you to stand up at the front, and I want you to look at your audience, and I want you to be really genuine. And I want you to say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome to Christie's, lovely to see you, thank you so much for coming. Lot number one. And none of them could do it properly. They couldn't do it genuinely. And it wouldn't just apply to Christie's. I'm not knocking Christie's, they're fantastic auctioneers. I don't mean that at all. What I mean is that this idea of being yourself, of being totally authentic, and that's what great salesmen have to be, is totally authentic. If they can't do that on a welcome level, on the very, very beginning, because audiences judge us in the first, I don't know, 15 seconds probably. Very good. In fact, there's a wonderful book by Malcolm Gladwell who says, it's in the blink of an eye. So, I mean, it's very, very quick, how we make our judgments. And if someone stands up and says, good morning, welcome, I hope that's not how they talk to their family or their children, right? And therefore, we know that even if we haven't seen these people before, we know that's not their real voice. And if they're not their real voice, we know they're not being real and authentic, and therefore we don't trust them on an animal level. So what we want to be able to do in the first few seconds is sound like a normal human being talking to another human being. And I would say there are three things you need for all forms of communication. It doesn't matter whether you're selling or what you're doing. We've got to have energy, clarity, and humanity. Three things. Energy, we need a little bit more energy than normal, but not game show host energy, not manic energy, but just a little bit more than, like a light bulb, sort of attracts a moth to a flame. A little bit, we want to try and just draw the audience's attention a little bit more than normal, a little bit more vocal energy. Clarity is obviously the clarity of what you're saying, and we'll come on to that in a second, I'm sure, and the way you say it, and obviously that's your voice and your body language and that sort of thing. And then lastly, and most importantly for me, is actually humanity. It's got to sound like it's one human being talking to another. I think the biggest problem with most sales pitches is that you feel that somebody's taking something from you. It's not a genuine conversation. They're not genuinely trying to find out a match. So here's a product that might, make your life easier. And if it makes your life easier, then buy it. Fantastic. If it doesn't make your life easier, then don't. It's not the right product for you. There's the sort of salesman that we buy from. And that's now clearly we want to try to put it in words where the customer does think that our product is what they want to buy. But that's what we've got to try and do. And we have to do it in an authentic human way.
Most salespeople love third-party stories, right? Customer stories, because they work. They work like a charm. And the reason they work is because as you are telling your customer's story, the person who's listening to you, your prospect, is getting a chance to sort of try on your product for size or your service for size, right? Because these stories are like little mini sales simulators. Mm-hmm. Because just as you were reliving sort of and connecting with the experience that I was sharing, right? So what you're doing is when you're listening to my story, you are filling in the blanks from your own experience and background, right? And you're relating to the story based on that. So that's why we say third-party stories, customer stories are like little mini sales simulations, which is enormously valuable. Now, the kinds of customer stories you need to tell are ones where the customer is the hero and not your company. Okay. And this is a big mistake most people make, particularly in sales. The story really needs to be about your customer and how they were able to achieve something extraordinary because they used either your product or your service. So you're the secondary character. You're the supporting cast, right? And it's all about the customer and what they were able to achieve, the difference it made in their life, right? That's the best kind of customer story.
I like to tell people to think in terms of buckets of inquiry, and I usually have 4. The rational bucket, the emotional bucket, the decision-making process bucket, and then communication styles. Most people only pay attention to the rational bucket. That is, what information did they ask for? How much do they know or not know? How much time do we need to talk about something? Those are the types of things that are often in a request for proposal. But if you really think about it, the people who wrote that request for proposal probably aren't the people in the room who are going to decide whether you get the business or not. So you need to focus on those people, find out who they are and how they interact. So the most important bucket could be the emotional bucket. You've probably heard the factoid that a lot of important decisions are 60 to 70% based on emotional, political, cultural reasons. So you need to know the tension and dynamic in that room, either reflecting on what you know about the people in the room already, or talking to third parties about that, or talking to the people themselves. When I do one of these consulting engagements where I'm helping an organization do a pitch, I try to manufacture touch points that allow us to listen to how people express themselves, find out what they think is more important than something else, understand what's at stake for them in bringing us in as a business partner. So all of those things are critical, and little cultural things as well.